Portugal did not initially form part of the system of alliances involved in World War I and thus initially kept its neutrality. However, tensions between Germany and Portugal arose because of German U-boat warfare, which sought to blockade the United Kingdom, at the time the most important market for Portuguese products. Clashes also occurred with German troops in the south of Portuguese Angola in 1914 and 1915. Initially, both the Portuguese and the German governments officially stuck to neutrality. Unofficially, there were many hostile engagements between the countries. Portugal wanted to comply with British requests and protect its colonies in Africa. Ultimately, tensions resulted in war between Portugal and Germany being declared, first by the latter. Approximately 12,000 Portuguese troops died during the course of World War I, including Africans serving in its armed forces. Civilian deaths exceeded the pre-war level by 220,000, 82,000 caused by food shortages and 138,000 by the Spanish flu. 1914. July. The German and British empires secretly negotiate about a possible dismemberment of Portuguese Angola. In such a case, most of the land would fall into the hands of the Germans. Angolabund had been founded in 1912, a German organization promoting the takeover. August to September. Skirmishes occur between German and Portuguese colonial troops in Africa, and the Germans instigate tribal revolts. September. The Portuguese government sends reinforcements to the southern border of Angola. After the war breaks out, the border between German Southwest Africa and Angola remains open. The Germans hope to supply food and possibly even arms through it. However, the Portuguese colonial government is hostile and tries to stop all of the trade. A few German nationals in Angola are interned. October. 1,600 troops arrive in Portuguese Angola, and 1527 troops arrive in Mozambique from Portugal, transported by British ships. 1915. November. 1543 troops arrive in Portuguese Mozambique, commanded by Moura Mendes. The second force is tasked to recapture the Kionga Triangle from the Germans. 1916. When Portugal complies with the British request to confiscate the German ships interned in Portuguese ports, Germany reacts by declaring war on Portugal, thus forcing the Portuguese officially into the war. February 23. Following a British request, Portugal interns 36 German and Austro-Hungarian ships in Lisbon. March 9. Germany declares war on Portugal, followed by Portugal declaring war on Germany and starting to organize Portuguese troops to go to the Western Front. Shortly afterward, Portugal begins closing its consulates in the Ottoman Empire. March 15. Austria-Hungary declares war on Portugal. June 9. Afonso Costa and Augusto Soares participate in an Allied economic conference in which the Allies decide that as a condition for peace, Germany would have to return the territories of Alsace-Lorraine to France and Kionga in Portuguese Mozambique to Portugal. July 15. The British government formally invites Portugal to take an active part in the military actions of the Allies. July 22. The Portuguese Expeditionary Corps, with 30,000 soldiers, is established in Tancos, Portugal, under the command of General Norton de Matos. August 7. The Portuguese Parliament accepts the participation of Portugal in the war, following the invitation of the British government. The Portuguese war effort reaches 55,000 infantry soldiers, plus 1,000 artillerymen, to be sent to France, 4,000 soldiers per month, to man 12 kilometers of battlefront. Only the first two divisions reach France, as the shipping of American troops drastically reduces the Allies' transportation capacity. At the same time, Portugal fields forces in its African colonies, in Mozambique, to defend the colony from German colonial forces, and in the south of Angola, against native unrest instigated by the Germans. December 3. The German U-boat, Mu-38, captained by Max Valentina, enters Funchal Harbour in Madeira and torpedoes and sinks 3 ships, CS Dacia, SS Kangaroo and Surprise, the commander of the French gunboat, Surprise, and 34 of her crew die in the attack. The Dacia, a British cable-laying vessel, which had previously undertaken war work off the coast of Casablanca and Dakar, is in the process of diverting the German South American cable into Brest, France. Following the attack, the Germans proceed to bombard Funchal for 2 hours from a range of about 3 kilometers. Batteries on Madeira return fire and eventually force the Germans to withdraw. December 26, the French government asks Portugal to send artillery crews to France to operate 20 to 30 heavy artillery batteries. 1917. A few Portuguese troops are sent to New Forest, England to help with the timber shortage, working with the Canadian Forestry Corps. Today the area is known as the Portuguese Fireplace. January 3. A convention with Britain regulates Portuguese participation in the Western Front. Portuguese troops of the SEP to be integrated in the BEF. January 7. The Independent Heavy Artillery Corps is created to respond to the French requests for artillery crews. Under the Portuguese Superior Command, this unit would operate 25 heavy artillery batteries. February 2. The first Portuguese troops arrive at the port of Brest, in Brittany, France. February 23. The second contingent of the SEP leaves for France. April 4. The Portuguese troops arrive at the front. The first Portuguese casualty is Private Antonio Goncalves Curado, killed in action. May 30. The 1st Infantry Brigade of the SEP 1st Division occupies a sector at the battlefront. June 4. Germans attack the sector defended by the 1st Brigade. June 16. 2nd Infantry Brigade occupies another sector on the battlefront. July 10. SEP 1st Division assumed responsibility of its part of the Portuguese sector on the battlefront. It is subordinated to the 11th Corps of the British Army, under the command of General Richard Haking. SEP 3rd Infantry Brigade occupies a sector on the front. September 23. The 4th Brigade, known as the Brigade of Minho, part of the 2nd Division, reaches the front. October 17. The 1st Portuguese Carpi artillery soldiers, representing Portugal's direct support to the French war effort, arrive in France. They are designated by the French as the Corps d'Artillerie Lourde Portugaise. November 5. Portuguese command assumes responsibility for its sector in the front. Until then, it had been under the command of General Henry Horne's British First Army. Late 1917. In Portuguese Mozambique, German officer Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck enters the colony from nearby German East Africa after a series of long-running battles with numerically superior British forces. December 12. 2 German U-boats, Mu-156 and Mu-157 again bombard Funchal, Madeira. The attack lasts around 30 min, and 40,120 mm and 150 mm shells are fired. There are 3 fatalities and 17 wounded. In addition, a number of houses and Santa Clara Church are hit. December 17. German U-boat Mu-156 stops and scuttles the Portuguese ship Icoriano southeast of the Azores. December 26. German U-boat Mu-157 sinks the Portuguese ship Lydia in the Azores. 1918. February 17. German U-boat Mu-157 sinks the Portuguese ship Estrela de Bissau off the coast of South Africa. March 16. The Portuguese artillery batteries enter in action. March 27. A German offensive restrains the Portuguese soldiers from being released. As a 3rd Portuguese division is never sent to France, the Portuguese army receives no reinforcements at all. Portuguese soldiers have to serve in the battlefront for a long periods and are thus among the most exhausted men in the front. April 6. The conditions of the Portuguese soldiers become so difficult that the British finally decide to release the Portuguese. The SEP is supposed to be reorganized, the 1st Division going to the rear as a reserve force and the 2nd Division becoming part of the 11th Corps of the British Army, under General Hacking's command. Hacking visits the Portuguese troops and decides to send the 2nd Division to the rear from April 9, which would never happen. The Germans attacked the British lines, forcing them to retreat about 60 kilometers. Instead of being released, the Portuguese troops have to fight off the German offensive on its sector. April 9. The Battle of Lalis, as it becomes known in Portugal, or the Operation Georgette, or Battle of Estes to the British, starts with a heavy artillery barrage from the Germans, followed by a German offensive with intensive use of lethal gas. The German 6th Army deploys 8 divisions, supported by intensive artillery fire. Against the force, the Portuguese have 20,000 soldiers and 88 guns. As a result, the 2nd Division is annihilated during the battle. The Portuguese SEP loses 327 officers and 7,098 soldiers, about 35% of its effective fighting capacity. The survivors are sent to the rear, some of the units being integrated into the British Army later on. During this battle, one of the most courageous acts in Portuguese history is perpetrated, as Private Aníbal Milhais defends the retreating Allied forces with nothing but his machine guns, allowing them to fall back and regroup. Once he runs out of bullets, he escapes the battlefield. After defeating 2 German regiments and forcing the remaining German forces to go around him, he gets lost along the way, having to eat nothing but the sweet almonds his family had sent him from Portugal for 3 days. Lost and exhausted, he is able to rescue a Scottish major from drowning in a swamp. The major leads him to the Allied camp and tells of Milhais's deeds. July. General Thomas Antonio Garcia Rosado is appointed as the new commanding chief of the remaining SEP. July. German forces, under von Lettow-Vorbeck, capture Namakura, in Portuguese East Africa and seize important arms and supplies for his force after smaller successes against Portuguese outposts had already helped reprovision his force. July 4. SEP 1st Division was subordinated to the British 5th Army, commanded by General William Birdwood. August 25. General Garcia Rosado assumes command of the SEP in France. The German U-boat Mu-157 sinks the Portuguese ship Gloria, 50 kilometers from Porto Santo, Madeira Islands. September 22. German U-boat Mu-157 sinks the Portuguese ship Gaia, near the Azores. October 14. In the action of the 14th of October 1918, Portuguese patrol boat NRP Augusto Castillo is sunk by the German U-boat U-139 after several hours of fighting. November 11. Germany accepts the armistice proposed by the Allies. The war ends. The war causes Portugal 8,145 dead, 13,751 wounded and 12,318 prisoners or missing. At sea, 96 Portuguese ships are sunk and 5 Portuguese ships damaged by German submarines. After the war, 1919 January 18. The Portuguese delegation at the Peace Conference in Versailles, France, is led by Professor Agas Moniz. In the treaty, Germany cedes the port of Kayanga, associated with German East Africa, to Portugal. That is Portugal's only gain from the war. 1921 November 19. Charles I, the last emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, goes into exile on the Portuguese island of Madeira, where he remains until his death. On April 1, 1922, he had tried, in 1917, to enter secretly peace negotiations with France. Although his foreign minister, Ottokar Chenin, was interested in negotiating only a general peace that would include Germany as well, Charles himself, in negotiations with the French with his brother-in-law, Prince Sixtus of Bourbon-Parma, an officer in the Belgian army, as an intermediary, went much farther in suggesting his willingness to make a separate peace. When news of the overture leaks in April 1918, Charles denies involvement until French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau publishes letters signed by Charles. That leads to Chenin's resignation and forces Austria-Hungary into an even more dependent position with respect to its seemingly wronged German ally. Determined to prevent a restoration attempt, the Council of Allied Powers agrees on Madeira because it is isolated in the Atlantic and easily guarded.